started. Amy went away to put on more comfortable shoes, but she'll be back. We might as well get started with check-in. Oh, here she is. Rob, you want to start with check-in?
Sure, I am Robert Dodig. I am well. I have no time constraints. I think Jessica. Oh, and Heather, yes. Jessica will be late. Oh, and Shanna Fletcher, thank you guys. No elephants. Expectation, make progress.
Oh, okay.
I'm Will Rothenberg. I'm doing well. No time constraints. Missing on the district side, I think is noted. I can't read all the way across the room to see if there's any TALC people missing. No elephants. Expectation. I'm going to go with good dialogue.
Hi, I'm Kelly Letcher. I'm doing well. No time constraints. Missing has been noted. No elephants, and I'll go with good dialogue as well.
Hello, my name is Kevin Kelfie. I'm doing well. I have no time constraints. Missing has been noted. No elephants. Expectations, make progress.
And Carl Burnside. I'm doing fine today. Depending on something else, I maybe have to leave around 6:30, but maybe not. Who is missing? I think it's been noted. No elephants. Expectations. Good dialogue.
Good afternoon, my name is Ben, I'm doing great. I have no time constraints, missing's noted, I have no elephants, and expectations to have a good dialogue.
Good afternoon, I am Helen Martin, I'm doing well. I have no time constraints, missing has been noted, I have no elephants, and expectations, good dialogue.
Hi, I'm Mike Ingwood. I'm doing great. I have no time constraints. Missing is noted. No elephants. Expectation, make progress.
Hi, I'm Suzette Rivera. I'm doing well. No time constraints. Missing has been noted. No elephants. And my expectations are to have good dialogue.
Ann Cole, I'm doing well. No time constraints. Missing has been noted. No elephants and expectations. I'll go with good dialogue.
Thank you. Mike Burke.
Good afternoon or evening. My name is Kurt Fazone. I'm fine. I have no time constraints. Missing on our side, we have Bob, Tara, and Sam. No elephants, and we're going to make progress.
My name is Kevin Daly. I'm fine. I have no time constraints. Missing has been noted. No elephants. My expectation is to make progress.
Good afternoon. My name is Jill Castellano. I am a peer collaborative teacher at Varsity Lakes Middle School and the vice president of TALC. I'm doing quite well. No time constraints except our normal end time of 7. I think everyone is missing has been noted. Oh, Mario, I was gonna say, I just can't read what's up there, and that's, it's my own vision issues. No elephants, and my expectation is to make progress.
Hello, I'm Anna Witten. I'm a 3rd grade teacher at Colonial Elementary, and I'm doing well. I have no time constraints, missing noted, no elephant, and make progress.
Good afternoon, my name is Kate Pearson. I am a testing coordinator at Highland Coast High School, and I am the treasurer of TALC. I have no time constraints, missing has been noted. I have no elephants, and I'd like to make progress.
Good afternoon.
Sorry, just.
Good afternoon, my name is Amy Johnson. I am well. I'm a 6th grade ELA teacher at Mariner Middle School. Time constraints, I don't have any. Missing has been noted, no elephants, and expectations to make progress.
Good afternoon, my name is Louis Fisher. I'm the Director of Instrumental Music at Gateway High School. I'm doing fine, I have no time constraints, missing has been noted, no elephants, and expectation of making progress.
I'm Christina Stewart, and I'm a K-5 art teacher at George Herbert Reserve Elementary. I'm doing well. Missing's noted, no elephants, expectations to make progress.
Good afternoon, my name is Iris Grimaldi. I'm a school social worker. I am doing well tonight. I have no time constraints, missing has been noted, no elephants, and my expectations are to make progress.
Good afternoon, my name is LaShonda Hutchins and I am the grade 3 through 5 math coach at Franklin Park Elementary. I'm also well. No time constraints, missing noted, no elephants, and expectations to make progress.
My name is French, I'm doing well. I don't have any time constraints. You have all only missing. I don't have any elephants. And my expectations are to help you succeed in both of your expectations.
And good afternoon, I'm Donna Mussenard. I'm doing well, I have no time constraints. But missing has been noted, no elephants, and my expectation is to help you through your expectations. And I would like to congratulate Louis Fisher today for being your new All right, you did get, if you notice on your agendas, the norms are listed there, as we had discussed at our last meeting, and you did get minutes before spring break, I believe. So are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Kurt? Oh, yes, Kevin.
I believe it's on there, but I think it's on 12, so, but Article 10, non-standard rate of pay during suspended operations or declared emergency, if we could add that to 10.
Okay. Or to the snapshot?
Article 10 snapshot.
Yeah. Okay. Make note of that and correct the minutes with that added to it on Article 10. Kerr?
Do we have to do language on it?
I think it's 10.04. It's from other contract. It's just not in the document.
And
We want to discuss it.
oh, okay.
It's going under the story for snapshot. And Kurt, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a number of them, so I just made a copy, if that's easy.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Just so Kurt knows, Kurt, I made several grammatical changes too. You probably some of the same ones I did already, so.
Because there were a lot of things that were duplicated from one snapshot to the next, so I just made those corrections.
With that, and I'll take it somehow.
Well, there's only one copy, so they probably, okay. No, everything. Thank you.
I had sent mine to Perla already, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with those, they were mainly grammatical, I'm assuming, Kurt?
All of it was.
Yeah, all of it was grammatical. So with the grammatical changes and Kevin's change, is everybody okay to accept the minutes with the correction? Please. Perfect, thank you. Okay, reviewing the interest-based document, I take it you have that attached to your agenda. Do we need to review it, or you think you can just read through it since all of you are veterans of this? It's the same document we've had in the past. We okay with this? You have a copy of it to review?
Yes.
Anybody want to talk about anything specific? We could do that if you want to. All right. Seeing nothing going on, we'll just go on to the next thing. Last time we did 5 snapshots, and we have agreed to start with Article 2 this evening. And the Article 2 snapshot is posted up here. The story was rights, privileges, responsibilities, 2.035, union dues deductions. Align the contracts, if I remember correctly, that's aligning it with Spell's contract. Update current forms of communication, since all that does is talk about mailboxes and bulletin boards. So, with that, who would like to start our story? Kurt?
I don't know how much I have for story. I guess I can do a little story, and we have an option ready to go.
Okay.
But a lot of the story is encapsulated in the snapshot. We've had discussions around aligning a lot of the different aligning language from various contracts. I can't say "and" or "administrator" in this case because they don't have associations that have dues deducted from. But our proposal that you'll see will replace the TALC language with the exact language from the spout agreement. That's really all I have. I can talk through the edits if you want, Donna, and I made copies for everybody. So
Okay.
you can see what I'm looking at.
Do you want to see his option, or does anybody have any other story they want to add to this before we go to options? Rob?
So this is 2.035, is that?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. We can certainly look at the option, that's no problem.
So you'll simply find the current TALC language at the top and the current spout language at the bottom. I made 3 edits to the bottom piece. In line 20, I added the word both. The statute refers to if a member of the association wishes to drop their membership, they're supposed to notify both the union and the district at the same time. So I added the word both there. In line 21, I changed month to pay period to reflect current practices. We get a payroll dues deduction report every pay period. And in line 24, I added the parenthesis 7 for completeness.
Okay, I know some of you just received this. Are there any questions or clarifications needed on this language? I know, evidently, if you've dealt with a spell contract, this isn't anything new, except for a few edits that you mentioned. Rob?
Yeah, and I did not do the research myself because it's a TALC issue, but I can certainly do it. Would this be compliant with the proposed bill that's in the legislature?
Which bill are you referring to, Ron?
The bill that would not permit the district to take payroll deductions for union dues any longer.
Yes, this language, the edits of this language, doesn't really change the intent of the language that was there. I think I would argue that both paragraphs would apply or would conform with the law. But I don't see how what we have here in the spout agreement, which I'm trying to lift, would not comply with that, one of those two law, or bills that are out there.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Anybody else?
Yeah, I do. I think the one thing that I see, and the bill hasn't passed, so at this point, it's not the law, but I did think that there was language in the proposed bill that a person that wanted to withdraw from the union didn't have to put it in writing.
Or
I don't have that nasty piece of language in front of me for personal reasons, but I think the piece that you're referring to would make it illegal, I guess is the best word, for the union to require someone who wishes to withdraw their membership from putting the reason that they want to join, withdraw in writing. They would still have to request in writing to have their dues stopped, or their membership ceased.
Yeah, so the reference to authorization is not authorizing them to be a member of the union, it's authorizing the union to deduct the money, correct?
Yes, 100% correct. And I think we call them membership forms now instead of authorization cards, but that's the language we've always used here.
Kevin?
And Rob, I think you're dead on, and Kurt's description is there are some locals that do kind of, I don't want to throw my colleagues under the bus, but may, in the terms of other people, put up unnecessary hurdles for people deciding to cancel their membership, like having to come into the office of the union, having to fill out a form that says why. I'm just going to tell you how the procedure works at our office. If you email me and say, I want to drop, I say, well, okay, great, you've got to email your payroll person. If they say, you know, have you notified the union? Say, yeah, this is the email Kevin sent to have me notify you. So, I mean, we may sometimes follow up with a phone call, like, hey, if we know them really well, we may follow up with a phone call to say, hey, you know, kind of what's the issue here? But really, for me, it's if, you know, you join when you want, you drop when you want, you just have to notify both organizations. And so sometimes the stuff that happens with us is they want it immediately. And currently, state statute is 30 days. I think in the current proposed legislation, it does away with the 30-day requirement, which, you know, whatever, it's fine. But yeah, so we don't put up what some people may describe as unnecessary hurdles, which might be where part of this legislation is coming from, because, you know, somebody would call and say, I wanted to drop my union, and they made me go into the office on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock and fill out this form, and so, not to borrow legal terms, but some people might describe that as onerous, and so I think they're doing away with the onerousness of the requirement. Well, we never had that to begin with here.
I know I'm dating myself, but when you started talking about that, it made me think of when you tried to cancel AOL back in the day. Remember that? How difficult that was? Oh my gosh. So, I just need some clarification about the board will provide the association with a complete list of deductions made each pay period language.
Is that?
Line 21.
21.
That currently happens. Every pay period, the district or payroll provides us electronically a report of each person who had a union dues deduction. This paragraph is only talking about union dues deductions.
Okay.
Well,
I don't know if you know the answer to this offhand, but do you know with like the bills that are out there, which parts of Florida statute they're seeking to amend? I mean, I know 447 is the one that has all of the stuff related to labor associations. I wasn't sure if you guys knew specifically what part of state statute those bills are seeking to modify.
A lot of it lives in 447. Some of it lives in, oh man, you put me on the spot here, Will. Some of it, I believe, lives in.
Who lawyer should be asking you that question?
Yeah, I should be asking you that question. I think a lot of it, or some of it also lives in 10, 12, something. It's around, I think some around definition of instructional personnel and where they carved out police, firefighters, correctional officers, and parole officers from every provision that has to do with union relations and dues deduction.
Rob mentioned too, the sheet that you gave references 447-303, which has specific language about dues deductions and collection. And I think it also even refers to it as uniform assessments.
I'm looking here, 112-313 is where some of the public officer stuff, where they cut out police, firefighters, and all those folks.
Okay, anything else? Kerr?
I don't really have anything else to add for story, so I think next I would like to test the option, but I understand that this is language that we just put in front of the district, so if they needed time to discuss it, I understand that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure time or there's any objection necessarily to the language. I think the concept appears to be changing potentially, right? I mean, the legislature's potentially going to change the way your members have to pay dues. And I'm just curious as to how we or how the union thinks we should handle that.
Okay, Kevin?
Non-lawyer, didn't say a Holiday Inn Express, non-lawyer. So I will gladly see that any legislative branch of any state or any of the federal government can make any law it wants. And it's ultimately the third branch of government's job, the judiciary, to determine its constitutionality, right? There are plenty of laws that have been passed in the history of this country that seem awful and never would have been allowed to stand, but for some reason went unchallenged for hundreds of years through the judiciary. So, I mean, I think for me, and again, maybe misapplying, but non-lawyer ESE teacher, so really good in ESE law, the supremacy clause of the Constitution. And so for me, the argument is always, if we have an in-force contract, where does that put us in the line of bumping? You know what I mean? And so that's the question here. And not being a legal mind, but our legal minds seem to think that an in-force contract for the duration of the contract would bump any change in state law that affected that part of the contract until, unless it was affirmed again by a court, overturned by a court, or the contract expires. That's my non-lawyer 5 minutes of paying attention at a FEA president's meeting explanation.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Will?
I think looking at the statute too, that 447-303 describes it as a right of the association. And I think it has then, like by reference, 447-507, which says, the penalty for strikes could include the, removal of that right. But I think that requires action by PERC based on what I'm reading in the statute. And so I don't know, I mean, again, I think you're saying you kind of have the contractual right, and then there's also this statutory right. And then I know you guys have constitutional, state and federal stuff that you shared that kind of comes into play there. But can I ask kind of a follow-up question, I think, based on what Rob is saying too. What would the response then be if the law changes? And I don't know if you guys have, other examples of cases where, we're in the middle of bargaining, negotiating, in good faith, and then the legislature takes an action, how does that, in your eyes, impact things? And I ask that just mainly because I know nobody wants to get into the area where it's like regressive bargaining and we're going back to bargain something that we've already bargained because the legislature has acted in a certain way.
I'm gonna dance around this a little bit because
Okay.
For me, this isn't as much about these bills that are out there. Honestly, I thought this would be an easy thing to get consensus on because it's been in the spout contract for years, and we like to be consistent and kind of model these contracts after one another. But that being said, I think there's an argument that if there is a change in law while our contract is in full force and effect, that contract language takes precedence. I have a word that I'm not using anymore. Yeah, it takes precedence as long as that contract is closed. I think both parties have a desire to close this contract and have it ratified before July 1st, which would be the beginning of the new fiscal year when any proposed bills or signed bills would take effect. And we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay, Rob?
And I hear you. I just want on the record that Senate Bill 256 has passed the Senate, and that includes the language that removes employers from deducting dues for an employee organization. So
The start date for that particular portion of the bill is July 1.
July 1, correct, Kevin? Yep.
All right, anything else? More questions? Now, Kerr mentioned testing this option. Are we okay to test, or do you want to reflect longer?
If we could just caucus quick.
Sure.
I suspected as much. Yeah, I mean, we just put it in front of it, so absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
What about 2 minutes, you said quick?
15
not quick. Is that a TALC 15 or a District 15? Because there's a difference. I think our TALC 15 is like 30.
One
So is
is
that?
not necessarily.
It's a District 15.
All right, so it'll be an hour if it's a District 15.
On his way out of the room, so I don't.
Maybe they could.
All right, well, let me, the district asked for it, so I'll let them go first, and then you guys can do it. Caucus report, Ross? Okay, sorry.
Thank you. We read briefly and discussed the proposal, and we're ready to move forward.
Okay, thank you. And Kurt?
We did the same.
Okay. So we're ready to move forward. Remember, our interest for this article was consistency. That's the only interest we had written down for the snapshot. But we can always add more if we think we need to add more. Kurt?
May we test? Oh, sorry.
Anna?
Well, in line 19, it should say amount due to the association.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it? Okay, with that edit, we are now looking at Article 2.035, dues collection. So all those who approve the proposed language with the correction, exceed your thumbs, please. All right, we are good. Orange circle. Yes, sir.
Just a point of order here, you may want to make the same correction in the spout contract, because that missing
Could you
two
cut?
is there on line 16.
Okay.
It's all right. Copy it word for word.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Okay, also, we'll give Amy a chance to circle and hang papers, and I think the next thing.
I'm not necessarily sure that's a typo, but amount due the association is, I think that's not necessarily improper English.
You already approved it.
All right, update current forms of communication unless there's anything else we needed to do to align the contract. That was the main thing, right, the dues deduction? Update current forms of communication is the next thing on that snapshot. And what do we have for that story? Kevin?
I mean, I guess for me, it's sometimes we just update to make things more relevant to the world in which we live.
Okay.
And so just like they probably took out smoke signals in the original agreement and substituted it with mailboxes.
Bob Rushall always wanted to do smoke signals.
There you go. Carrier pigeon and
For
the
those
like.
of you who know Bob.
It may be worthwhile to kind of update the forms of communications we use as past practice of regular occurrence.
Okay. And anything else to that story? I think that was a pretty clear and concise story. Suggestions to update, for update? Will?
I don't know if this is story, but like a little bit of background too, because I know TALC provides advice to their reps about some of the limits of what's appropriate and not appropriate. And I know statute says, you're not supposed to hand out flyers during the school day to students or do other things that would disrupt the educational environment. And so I don't know if Kevin wants to give a little background on kind of what the general guidance is around that.
Yeah, thanks. It jogged my memory. So, as long as we're talking about 256, it just, for me, the writing of the law stinks of people who don't know how things work. One of the things is, you can't do union work during your taxpayer-funded job, right? We advise our reps to have the meetings before and after school. And the only place where that would be a problem, and we'd have to work it out maybe through impact, is if somebody wants a representation during the workday. But Will's right. I mean, I'm just also going to make a statement out here that I assume every email I send ends up on somebody's desk in an administrative role somewhere around the district. It's safe to assume that. And so I also caution my reps, and I do this as well, is like I can send an email to the school email addresses. I can say the following: please come out to bargaining Monday from 4 to 7 in the Caloosahatchee room. We're going to be talking about salary. That's the message on the district email, things like that. There's no call to arms, whereas the personal one might be a little more incendiary, depending on my mood at the moment. And I'm always assuming that even the ones to the personal emails end up on an administrator's desk somewhere in the district. We just have too many members and too many principals and too many buildings to assume absolute kind of covertness and secrecy behind the emails. So again, we also caution our reps on the email thing. You can email people and say, TALC contract voting is happening the 27th and the 28th in the staff lounge. You can't say, come vote no on the staff contract because, everybody sucks. That's the personal email, not the public one. And so again, we've kind of trained our reps up on that. And that's one of the first things I tell new reps, because they're always concerned about crossing that line. And listen, as long as the email is informative, you can send it about TALC business. I'm having my rep meeting, my classroom, Thursday at 4 o'clock. I look forward to seeing everybody there. So those are the kinds of things that we advise our reps, and I tend to focus on, is that kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure of any instances where I've gotten reports from anybody that anything somebody has sent over school email has crossed that line. But again, because the contract lives beyond us, and I never want to necessarily negotiate myself or my next in line into a corner, I do think, for clarity's sake, there maybe should be some can be informative, can be, that kind of stuff, to kind of lay the parameters so there's never any confusion from future presidents, future directors, future heads of HR, future superintendents, future principals about kind of what we mean by what you can do. But I think we need to kind of solidify the right to use district email for things like that in more than just the past practice, because it happened long before I was president. I remember getting emails from Donna and Mark with the TALC newsletter and stuff like that on my district email. So it's a long-established past practice, but it may be time to kind of solidify it in the language.
Rob?
I think one of the things that needs to be noted is that and I don't dispute the past practice, but anything that's put on district email, unless it's student record, is public record. So if and when we get to the point where we have some type of an agreement, the union needs to be aware of that. So there may be times when the union doesn't want some of their business to be public, and that's perfectly fine. They're not necessarily governed by the Sunshine Law in the same way we are. So I just want that to be on the record.
Okay, thank you.
I also don't make the assumption that it won't end up on Wink News or Facebook, because I know things I have sent to the members have been photographed and put up in a more broad front on Facebook. So I'm always keenly aware that, and I often have conversations with members. Send it to me from your personal email to my personal email. Please, let's not have this discussion in public record. And so, yeah, I'm keenly aware, and I hope everybody else is, of the rather broad kind of public records rules that exist for a good reason in Florida.
Okay, anything else? Will?
So I have a question, and maybe something else to kind of throw in the mix too. So I know it sounded like where Kevin, you were saying some of the use of email is for the purpose of posting, as it's described in the contract right now. So it would be for providing notice of, when there's a meeting, when there's a vote, purely informational in nature, not necessarily persuasive type writing. And I know there's, again, in statute, some of the language about not interfering, domineering with, the union from the district side, and also from the union side not interfering, again, with the operations of the district, in a disruptive way. But I'm wondering, do you think that that's more of a mailbox type thing, a posting type thing? The other area that my mind kind of went, and this is, I guess, just kind of background story stuff, is I think it's kind of weird to try and figure out what it is that we want the contract to say, because we know the behaviors that are out there that are already best practices, and where some of this stuff is already working. And so I'm trying to capture some of that. It's kind of the reverse of I think what we're normally doing at the bargaining table. But just thinking of there's language in there about meetings on campus, and I think, like you said, meetings typically are before and after school. I know all principals, know that at the end of a faculty meeting, you pass the microphone or give the floor to your TALC rep and tell everyone, you're free to stay or go as you please. Here's the TALC rep's portion of that. And where there have been issues because people have been having faculty meetings in the morning, I think there have been accommodations made to allow for that to take place and not interfere with people making it to their morning duty, that kind of stuff. But again, just wasn't sure kind of where do you see some of the email stuff fitting in to the existing language, or do we need to tweak it a little bit?
I mean, I think I have a pretty good handle. And what I send, honestly, I send out, and there are two different messages at times, right? So let's say we're in November and we have endorsed candidates. The message on the school email is, hey, elections are coming up. Please go vote. If you need any information, go here. Right? And then it references a webpage. If the personal email is a little more direct about the endorsed candidate, right? So, I think I have a pretty good understanding, and I think the district has a pretty good understanding of what is best practice and kind of what works and what doesn't. Again, like for this, I may send out, hey, come to the bargaining meeting tonight from 4 to 7, come late, leave early, do what you need to do. We're talking Article 2, really exciting stuff, right? So I'm not sure if we need to tweak what we've got, or if we need to just kind of include email as kind of I don't want to say a protected way, but an enshrined way to communicate with employees moving forward.
Anything else on this issue?
I also don't have language or an option, so I'm completely useless in that regard.
Well,
so I'm just trying to find ways again to kind of characterize the communication or the types of communication that are going out. I think as you're describing it, also strikes me as if some of it is one directional communication, is like the posting type. There's a difference between putting something on the bulletin board that says that this is when the meeting is, versus having the dialogue back and forth through, messages being passed over email. Is that like a fair? I'm just trying to feel out some of the ends of it so that when we're capturing it for the minutes, we've got, plenty of context.
I think all available methods of contact are best to reach people these days.
Including cupping your hands instead of using a microphone.
I don't have the microphone.
It wasn't his turn to speak, it was mine. Sorry. But I think kind of where we're going with this is, I'm one of those people, I know where my mailbox is, and it gets really full really fast, and I tend to leave things in there, and sometimes things get placed on top of it. I think the idea is that the mailbox is a great form of communication, but we all know email's better. I don't check my mail at home for 7 days sometimes. because everything comes to me via email. So maybe even just adding something that says, in lieu of mailboxes, that email can also be a form of communication may meet some of the goals that we're looking for.
Sure.
I have some sample language that might meet the needs that you're looking for.
All right, do we want to make this an option, or?
No. Is it on?
Do you want to do
It's on. No, I don't want this to be an option.
Okay.
Maybe, I'm curious if this is where Bill's mind's going.
Okay, go ahead.
So, one of my colleagues shared with me some language that says the union shall not use the district's email system as a forum for advocating their position on a disputed issue or to engage in inflammatory comments against district personnel. It says they shall have access to district email to notify bargaining unit members of the time, place, and subject matter of meetings, negotiation sessions, and related announcements, including training, programs, and opportunities. To me, it's informational versus persuasive. Persuasive in politics lives on either our internal Island Coast FEA emails or our members' personal emails who opt in to receive those notifications. I think if it's informational, district emails are perfectly fine.
Okay. Kevin?
I'm chewing too, sorry. Just as an example, we're going out to Heights tomorrow to do a contract ratification vote because they currently don't have a rep. So I think the message is better coming from me. I mean, Mr. Palo has no ill intent, right? He's kind of doing a follow-up message. But I sent an email to all TALC bargaining unit members at Heights saying, hey, listen, sorry we weren't there today. The day exploded. We'll be out tomorrow in the staff lounge during lunches. Come by and vote. So like that's an example of kind of the latest email I sent today. Just one of those contract voting is happening. And really, I only did that at the 3 or 4 schools we don't have reps. The places where we had reps, I relied on the reps to inform their people at their building to get kind of people into the voting process. Kerr has also brought up pony stop. That's what he wrote on the paper and passed me.
Okay, done, Kevin?
Yeah.
All right, Rob?
Then we can talk about the pony later. I mean, I think Will asked a real good question, which if you look at the current language in the contract, there's 2 paragraphs before I die. One's posting and one's mailboxes. And the posting seems to indicate some of what Kerr just said about posting meetings. Mailboxes are for, I assume, more significant information because there's a vetting process in that language, that it has to go to the superintendent and be approved. So if we're going to add on to either one of these paragraphs or amend them or create new, I think we have to figure out what we're talking about here. I understand the language Kerr just read. In fact, I think that's from a National Labor Relations Board decision, which doesn't impact us, but I think that's where that language comes from. So are we just talking posting, or are we talking you want to send out more than that through district email? I think we have to come to some meeting of the minds relative to what we're talking about.
Okay, Kerr.
There's 2 things. As it relates to I like the way you said it, the vetting process. That piece of language has not been enforced at least since 2016, as far as I know. And Kevin's right, we don't put a lot of things in mailboxes. I think we send a new member packet out in the pony to everyone who joins. That may be the only thing that they get in their mailbox, other than, hey, come join us for a Labor Day picnic or something along those lines. It's hardly ever used, but I think striking some of this some of these strings that are around the mailboxes and just labeling it union communication. I think these days folks use email for just about everything. So to me, it's kind of one in the same.
Well,
I think, and I guess this is another part of the reason for asking the question. Like when you look at the current contract language about posting in mailboxes, it's about half a page. And I think it gets into some of the stuff that we were discussing. And I think you guys have kind of alluded to this too, that a lot of times, when you're relaying information, if you can have a face-to-face conversation with a person, that's preferable, to sending out a blast email to everyone. I know people's inboxes, whether it's email or like the Pony mailbox, they get clogged sometimes. I think, and Kurt, you kind of were hinting at this too, as far as like the vetting process for emails. A lot of stuff has been sent out as joint communications. Or I know the couple of times that you guys, like I think when you did the electronic ratification, we were able to figure out how to make sure that it wasn't getting flagged by spam filters, because obviously that was kind of an official function that needed to be carried out, and that it was expedient to use it in that limited instance. I don't know if being overly specific is to our advantage, especially because, as Kevin said, the types of communication may change, or the preferred format or what's effective might be different. So I don't know if, when we get to the point of trying to discuss options or put things out there, if part of that would be to try and consolidate some of that. I personally am a fan of shorter contracts. I think they're more likely to be read than longer ones, and more likely to be understood, easier to train people on. But again, I know there's a lot of language in there, and so I wouldn't want to go through and just like redline everything just to redline it. But I don't know, again, kind of where the ending point would be. I liked what you said, what you read earlier. What Rob was saying was the NLRB kind of standard, because I think there is that tension of, you guys have a right of access, you have First Amendment rights. Again, the interference, like I don't imagine you guys sending spam emails to people. Whether they want to receive your emails or not is another thing, but you're not going to be sending solicitations and other stuff that's wholly unrelated to what we're here for.
Yeah, just curious, do you feel as though you have a difficult time communicating with your members?
Kevin.
I have multiple methods with which to communicate to my members. Personal email, school email, bulletin boards, mailboxes, mass text. And so I think it's one of those things where I'm looking for the best coverage, and email, honestly, email is not the best way to get some people. Email with a text message catches others that don't read email. Again, I think at this point, the use of district email for things, and I guess I'm confused about, and maybe I'm just confused. If I send an email about like the tentative agreement is going to be voted on the 27th and the 28th, that would be something you would consider to be a posting, right?
Well, it says such notices shall consist of time, date, and place.
So that's something that, because I think I'm coming at it, I don't know. So those types of messages, you're making akin to putting something up on the TALC board, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what Will and I are trying to ascertain, like what would be a posting and what would be the use of a mailbox.
I think anything I post I could put in a mailbox, and anything I put in a mailbox I can post. It just depends on whether I want to print 3,500 copies or I want to print 100 copies. I mean, because I could just as easily put like the location, time, and date of meetings in everybody's mailbox as easily as I could post it. So again, for me, it's not, I'm not necessarily tied to the constraining differences of what's the difference between something I put on the board or something I put in the mailbox. I'm not gonna put anything on the board that is inflammatory. I can't put anything on the board that says come out and, you know, beat up the district and boo them every time they open their mouth at bargaining. I can't put that up on the billboard, just like I can't put that in an email out to everybody's district email. So I'm struggling with like defining my communication as a posting or a mailbox. Because mailbox could also be email box has evolved over time as opposed to the mailbox that Shay says she doesn't pay attention to.
All right, Will, and then Anna. Anna, go ahead. I didn't know if you ever responded to that.
I was just gonna say, like, as an example, so when I look at the current language, such notices shall consist of the time, date, and place at which a meeting will be held. So when I need to have a meeting with my TALC members, I definitely do not create a flyer and print it and put it in everyone's mailbox. I just send an email and I say, hey, there's gonna be a TALC meeting, either, you know, whether I do it before or after school, yellow 32, at this such time. And then kind of just to highlight the difference between things that would be posted, because that language is also in that section of the contract. I may put on the TALC bulletin board bargaining sessions. Hey, your next bargaining session is Monday, 3/27, Cooloosahatchee A and B, 4 to 7 p.m. Or if we're hosting an event, you know, a Labor Day picnic or something, I may post that information on the TALC bulletin board for people to walk by and see like when the next event is. So, I mean, that's just how I handle it at my school site. There's different things that are posted. And as far as like, when I read this, the notices that are being sent out with that information is definitely in their email box, their inbox, versus their physical mailbox. There's not really much that we put in there, except for the only thing I can think of is the welcome packets when new members join.
Okay, Will?
I think too, just for the benefit of whatever viewers we have on YouTube and posterity, I think one of the interesting things as we're having the conversation too is looking at some of the language and trying to figure out like what modern means of communication align to what. I mean, as you were talking about some of the things that can be posted versus emailed, and is email posting it, I was thinking of, we also have no reply email accounts where I would imagine, because I know you guys have done this with things and we do it a lot too, if you're just trying to provide the information, you're not trying to solicit a response from 6,000 people, nor do you want to drag everyone into the reply chain of, you know, thank you, you know, did someone lose their cell phone? I have a good recipe, does anyone want it? You know, someone's car left their lights on, you know, have you seen my stapler type conversations. I know one of the other things that I think you guys are kind of, as we're talking through it again, I think we all know what it looks like at the end of the day, trying to figure out what the contract language is that mirrors that is maybe a little bit trickier. But I know the same thing applies for like facilities. You know, again, where it says that the union may have use of the facilities, that doesn't mean that in the middle of the day, you know, you can have a powwow in the auditorium. You know, it still requires the same reasonable professional courtesies of arranging, you know, to use the classroom space or notifying someone that people are coming on campus or those sorts of things, which I think Anna, you were kind of saying that with the email too. Like there's kind of some norms and some standards for what's professional use of email generally, that hopefully, you know, everyone is respecting. And And that again, you guys wouldn't be the worst offender if there was an issue, because there's plenty of other instances of, you know, weird misuse that come through professional standards. But saying that, those professional courtesy norms kind of would still apply regardless of where we land.
Okay, Jill?
I just want to say too, I think something that's really important when I look at these two sections, the posting and the mailboxes, is the idea that we also as TALC have an exclusive privilege, and that protects us from having outside entities trying to come in to meet with our members and trying to circumvent our organization's exclusive privilege to represent, meet with members, and inform members. And then too, I go back to what Anna said. Our bulletin boards, yes, we have some flyers or some updates up on there. I know on the SPALC bulletin boards, there are some federal posters that have to be posted. You guys know more about those things than I do. But we don't post as much. Part of it too is because, like, for example, if we have a meeting or a flyer, that stuff does get shared electronically because we're also trying to not waste paper. We're trying not to waste resources. And then because we've transferred so much of what we do to electronic, like signing in on the computer and no longer going into an office to sign in, people barely even go into a production or a mailroom in a school anymore because we've worked really hard to make resources digital. One, just to save resources, right? So if we can limit what we're printing, then that saves either TALC resources, it could save the district resources that we don't necessarily need to waste. But we've moved so much to electronics. I mean, everything comes up on our phones or on our watches. So I think that's the important thing too. But the majority of communications, like when I think of my communications, it's letting people know, hey, don't forget to vote, right? And I mean like on a ratification. Okay, or saying, hey, like I tend to forward all the labor relations emails because people's emails get busy, and I forward those to my members, and I just want to say, hey, I hope you've had an opportunity to read this document, and I'm available if you need assistance in understanding something from labor relations. Like, so I tend to just re-forward out labor relations communications to TALC members to just remind them, like, hey, there's this document out there, have you read it? Same thing with insurance and benefits. We get reminders about open enrollment, and when we get those reminders that are sent by the district, I forward it to my members, and I always remind them, hey members, it's important for you to get this done. If you don't know how to do something, please reach out to someone to make sure. So a lot of our communication is really informative, but that's the type of stuff that maybe I would have posted on a bulletin board that I'm not posting on a bulletin board to save resources.
Okay. Anybody else? Her.
I just have two things.
Okay.
One, I think we've kind of hinted around this, but it's, you know, it's an interest of both parties to have, in our case, membership, in your case, workforce that's engaged and educated, you know, on the issues of the day. And that's a lot of what, you know, what TALC sends out is information, you know, to educate. Also, as I'm reading and rereading and rereading, it says in line 25, distributing notices in employee mailboxes. It doesn't say physical mailboxes. My inbox is a mailbox. So perhaps we're covered.
So it kind of sounds like we're all on the kind of the same page here. It's just coming down to the nitty gritty. Rob?
I think I thought the same thing when I started reading it, but then when you see all the vetting that has to go on to use a mailbox, I'm not certain that's what the parties are talking about here today. Every time you send an email, I don't think you want to have to check with the superintendent's office. So I think we probably have to come up with something new.
I think, the timeline, sometimes things are of a sensitive time nature and sometimes they're not. And so, like again, I don't ever send an email out that I'm assuming ends up on somebody's desk that's in a management role somewhere on the chain, whether it be a building level person or somebody higher up the chain than that. But again, I think because, you know, mailbox, I mean, I guess, how does the district define employee mailbox? Do you consider their inbox a mailbox? Because if you do, I can use it just like the physical one, but, you know, the vetting seems to be onerous, to use that word twice tonight. Onerous a little bit just for regular emails about ratification, and then, so do we carve out an email section that talks about what Kerr had mentioned, kind of the idea that this is what it's going to be used for? And again, if, just like I have the mechanism to bring up if something is the contract is violated, I think the district has the same mechanism, right? So if we have this policy in there and it has these restrictions that Kerr read aloud, and I end up violating it, or a rep ends up violating it, or a future president ends up violating it, then I think there's recourse in the contract to fix that, to fix that issue. I mean, again, I think, you know, we can't legislate everything, but we can, I think you guys can file a grievance too, can't you? You can say we're doing something wrong, you can't? Well, shit, I'm gonna start doing all kinds of stuff. I was worried y'all could do
The ULP.
well, you could do that if, you know, if it was, but you can't do that if we don't have kind of guidelines, because at this point, I can use past practices, I can use district email. And I kind of self-regulate by common sense the nonsense I don't send.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, so I just wanted to answer your threshold question there. I think Article 4, if we go back, and Donna was probably involved, the intent of that language was in reference to the mailboxes that are at the school, the physical mailboxes. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I don't think common vernacular, we refer to our electronic mail as an inbox, not as a mailbox. Anyway, but I'm certain that language was written before email became what it is today. So, but I understand your point about past practice and the use of email too. So I'm not, you know, there's other doctrines in labor law too. So that's why I think what you're all talking about potentially is posting under number 3. So just my thought.
Just to step out of the box a little, the mailboxes and the vetting and all that, the only time that we ever used vetting, and usually it was a superintendent designee, which was usually HR, was for TALC newsletters. Those we had to send to HR first for approval, and then we could put it in mailboxes, the physical mailboxes, not electronic mailboxes, because there weren't electronic mailboxes way back then. So basically, that's what that language was all about. And that language was there even before I was involved, so it's old. Very old. Kerr.
Other than just updating the contract, is there another reason why we're having the discussion? I mean, have there been issues? And also, I appreciate you giving that commentary, Donna, because I'm also wondering, I'm looking at the SPALC agreement, the vetting process as it is they don't have those same regulations. So is there an issue with TALC communication that's not so much of an issue with SPALC communication?
Not that I know of. But, Will?
I'm really tempted to just mess with you and say, oh yeah, you know, it's something to do with TALC. I think one of the things though, I don't know that there really have been issues. I mean, I think the 1 or 2 times that I can think of where there have been issues where people have been, you know, advocating or doing things like kind of out of bounds, I think most of the time TALC kind of self-reports and says, hey, we got a call that this person went a little far, we've talked to them, you know, or would you mind having the principal kind of reinforce the message to us that, like, look, that's not part of, you know, what this is to be used for. And I think, obviously, the district shouldn't be in a place of content moderation. But I also think, as you guys are saying, you know, whether it's posting, whether it's mailbox, whether it's flyer distribution, you know, whatever it is, the message is kind of limited to who, what, where, you know, when kind of questions. There's not a whole lot of substance behind that, because you're really just trying to use that as a point of contact, that if someone's interested, then they'll reach out and they'll have the conversation with you, or they'll, you know, find the resource themselves. So I think we're kind of answering some of that, but I know Carl had his hand up, so.
Okay. Carl?
One of the reasons having point mode done Spout, I've been on Spout and TALC. And one of the things that Spout really insisted on having the paper copies, because a lot of their members did not necessarily always get to their emails and things of that nature. So for them, it was more important in terms of having it physically posted. So like, for instance, the custodians in their receiving area, the cafeteria folks in their area and things of that nature, because they didn't also have a mailbox. So there were some dynamics, and still are, honestly, that existed back then. So that's where I think some of that language was going to be different, because Spout wanted and needed a different mechanism of communication, because it's really about getting the communication. And for some of our employees, it was definitely better to have it physically posted in their work areas. So that was, you know, some of the just some of the dynamic from more years than I care to say that I remember.
Okay, anybody else? Well, okay.
Sorry, you guys are giving me a lot to think about. Another wrinkle, and I don't know, as Carl was saying that, I don't know in terms of accessibility, if there's any difference there, because I know like Carl was saying, sometimes, you know, it's accessibility in terms of people and their preferred method of communication. Sometimes it's accessibility because, you know, they have certain limitations, whether it's, you know, language or auditory or visual or those sorts of things. So I don't know if that's another thing that we need to account for. But obviously, if we can't be excluding people by the method of communication either.
Okay, Kevin.
Anna wants to caucus, but before we go, that's why, again, we use the multi-layered approach, the hustle text messaging, the personal emails, because we have a Facebook page too, that's members only, and it's only for us to post and inform. It is not a message board where people can debate the finer aspects of who's the best starting rotation in Major League Baseball. It's simply for us to provide information to members. And so again, I don't think, what's that?
Mets.
Okay, that's yet to be determined. But yeah, so again, I think we kind of use that multi-layered and multifaceted kind of buckshot mentality, where we're going to send it to 17 different ways to 19 different people, and one of them will stick. And you know, some people will get a little annoyed, and that's part of living with it. But I think Anna wants to caucus, yeah. Maybe we'll come back with language, and Rob wants to say something, I think, before.
Yeah, just before you caucus, I just wanted to say that I think we are going to have to perfect some language around this. So I'm not sure we're capable of doing that tonight. So I just wanted to say that before you caucus.
I think we may come back with the beginnings of language to perfect, as much as humans who are inherently flawed can perfect. So 20 minutes?
Okay, 20 minutes. If you want to stay here, you can stay here and not. No?
I think we are underclaiming for the record.
Yes, you are. Amy mentioned it as soon as she saw you walk in. She said, that was fast.
Getting better.
Before we get your report, Jessica came in and we never did let her do her check-in. So Jessica, would you do check-in, please? Amy will get it for you.
Jessica, I'm doing well. I had time constraints at the beginning of the meeting, none at this side. Missing is noted. I have no elephants, and expectation is to have a good dialogue.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, let's let Amy get that back up, and then we will continue with the caucus report from TALC. The district did not caucus, so go ahead, Carl.
Donna, before you do that,
Yep.
I just wanted to announce, because Jessica just introduced herself, that she has earned her doctorate, so congratulations. Dr. Duncan.
That's okay.
Congratulations.
Okay, Kara.
So we had a brief conversation about the option, Donna, and we looked at our calendar and realized that we really only have, what did we say? Two more sessions after this one scheduled. So we don't really have a lot of time to play around with the language. So we thought we would take a stab at it. So we have two options.
Okay.
One, under item 3 for posting.
Hold on a sec.
This is page 3 of the printed contract. This is under 2.03 still. So under item 3 with posting, we just wanted to include the reference from the spout agreement that the bulletin board space should be no less than 24 by 36 inches. 24 by 36.
Oh, less.
And option number 2, we had an edit to item 4. We'd like to rename the provision communication instead of mailboxes. Tell me if this isn't going to work for you, Amy.
So we're going to change mailbox to
Communication in the title. In line 25, we would like to replace the words "in employee mailboxes" with the phrase "to employees."
line 25, change.
In employee mailboxes.
In.
IN. My Southern comes out. Everybody wants something. In employee mailboxes to the phrase "to employees." Same change for line 30.
I'm even have to in employee mailboxes.
To quote, "to employees," TO employees.
And the same in line
30.
30.
Also part of this option, we would like to strike the end of line 30 that starts with the words "a copy of," all the way down to line 34, the last word "mailboxes." One more thing and I'm done, I promise. Line 39, we'd like to strike.
Line 34, last word is mailboxes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And also strike the last sentence. It's the end of line 39 through line 4.
What am I striking at the end of line 39?
It's just the last sentence of that provision.
Okay, that's it. Any further questions, clarifications, Rob?
Yeah, and I appreciate the efforts, and certainly, option one is, I didn't know how big the bulletin boards were, so that's interesting. 24 by 36.
At least.
Right. And then number two, I would be remiss if I sat here and said, when the superintendent has the authority to do certain things, and I'm gonna sit here and say it's okay to take those out without that conversation happening between myself and the superintendent, I am certainly not of the authority to sit here and say that that's okay. So I will be flat out honest and tell you that that will have to be discussed with the superintendent.
Okay. Kevin? No? Well.
I pulled up the spout contract for comparison, and I see that they've got 24 by 36, so I'm glad that you guys went to match them rather than to say that you needed a 3 by 5 or something else. That saves us the infighting, but I'm wondering if there's a possibility to look at more of the alignment of some of that, because I think that was the effort that you guys were making, but looking at spout kind of postings and mailboxes for them is like 10 lines, again, rather than half a page, which I think is what you guys were after, so wasn't sure if like some of that ironing out could take place. Also, I noticed the part for facilities for TALC is also, 10, 11 lines, and for SPALC it's 2 lines, just barely.
Okay. So it does not sound like we can vote on the options.
Well, I mean, if they want to test number one, I mean, make a straw design of number one,
Can I add something to that I just thought of, because we have buildings where the bulletin boards are shared. I don't know if it needs reinforcing in the agreement that they shall be separate, or just the fact that each one has its own provision means that they're separate.
Well,
I'm wondering too if there's some benefit to having a conversation with SPALC, because I know like Mr. Burnside was saying, it might not be the lounge or production area that's most visible for support staff. There might be another area where they're signing in, clocking in, that's more accessible to them at different points during the day. That might be preferred as well. But I think your point of there's a distinct right in each of the books that having a shared board doesn't necessarily meet that test. I also wonder, I don't know off the top of my head, how many schools already have that, or like you're saying, how many of them just for economy of space, put both things on boards in 2 locations, or both things on the one in the office, but not the one, in the other part of the school. That might be something that we would want to find out.
I don't believe it's a common problem, but as long as we're solving the one, we might consider solving the other. Oftentimes I tell people your life is in such good order that, this is what we have time to worry about. Wish I was there. But since I'm willing to test one as it is now and just live with the fact that, unless Kurt just looked at me. Yeah?
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Kurt.
I'm reading the rest of the SPALC item for item 4, and it just makes so much more sense of what's in the TALC agreement. Part of me now wants to throw up option 3 and say just lift the whole posting from SPALC. It gives our exclusivity. It gives us the list and location of each board.
It matches the interest of consistency.
While I've got the mic and running my mouth, we were talking about some of the, I guess, the idiosyncrasies. When we talk about mailboxes, I think there's some sites in the TALC unit that don't necessarily have mailboxes. I don't look up physical mailboxes. They have electronic mailboxes. Lee Virtual School, I don't believe has physical mailboxes. I'm not sure our employees at DJJ or some of the district locations have physical mailboxes.
Well,
It's funny that you mentioned that. I was wondering the same thing about some of those locations, and also thinking of, I want to say, one or maybe more than one of the transportation compounds. I think at one point they had like locked mailboxes, and then it was difficult because either people misplaced their keys or didn't know the combination, and so then they spun it around because there was some concern about, people being able to, see what was in other people's mailboxes, or putting things in the wrong mailboxes or taking things out of the wrong mailboxes. So again, the struggles of physical mailboxes are well documented.
Did you end up in option 3?
Yes, please.
okay, so we're going to add the option 3, to use the SPELC language in place of the TALC language in Article 2.
Officially, I think I need to withdraw my request to test option 1
Okay, thank you.
for the parliamentarians among us.
This is for 2.03.
Yes. It's spouts 2.03 parentheses 4. But it's TALC 2.03 parentheses 3.
Okay. Rob?
To clarify, basically, you want the SPALC posting language to replace the TALC posting language?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's where we're going. Okay. Anything else? Kevin?
I will test option 3.
All right, we have a request to test option 3. If you are okay with option 3, may I see thumbs, please? All right, option 3 is a go. All right. Let's shuffle some paper around. What else do we have in Article 2? That's all we have on the
Yeah,
snapshot.
I think that's it. Just what we're going to do about it. I think Rob needs to follow up with the superintendent about
Oh, right,
stuff.
right. And we'll make note, Rob is going to follow up on that. All right, so that does it for Article 2. Yeah, Rob.
Sorry,
Okay.
not so fast. Number 10, paragraph 10 in that provision, or that article, requires within 30 days of approval of the final draft of the agreement, the board agrees to provide the association 150 copies of the agreement.
I move 350.
That's
With all the stuff you allow me to send through email, you can save the paper and print us 300 contracts.
So that's a costly endeavor. I'm not sure where the union is on that. I mean, we're just wondering if there's a chance we could cut back on that or eliminate that.
Okay,
I
Kevin?
have some questions. I guess when you say cutback, what does that practically mean? Like from, what is it, 100, from 150 to 2, or from 150 to 50, or, and what would the cost savings be, and where would those cost savings go?
Will?
My department budget is what pays for the printing of the contracts. I want to say between TALC and SPALC, depending on the year and the length and how fancy we make the covers and whether we do the spiral binding or whatever else, it can be as much as $5,000 annually. And we're replacing the contracts then, you know, on an annual basis. I think we've started to work with TALC and SPALC where the union will provide binders and then we provide a print copy of the contract for the bargaining teams so that everyone has that for that purpose. I would imagine in terms of like who the most likely candidates for having like a hard copy would be. I know like there's a couple departments in the district where I think the directors like to have a hard copy on hand in case, you know, the internet goes out. Staffing and payroll are kind of obvious ones there. I wonder though, is there kind of the same necessity from the TALC side that like your e-board obviously, you know, is a group of people that you would want to have it. I know we reduced the number of print copies at one point because, you know, there were 2 months, 3 months left in the year and you guys were saying, hey, by the time, you know, reps get familiar with it, it's online, people are doing, you know, Control F, searching it rather than going through the index like they once were. So I don't know if there's any interest in limiting it to executive board and kind of like, you know, for the district side, kind of cabinet level stuff. The money would go back to my department budget. We will use it on things like printer toner, chart paper. I don't know that snacks are something that we can buy with our budget.
Kelly is shaking her head no.
Yeah, but if you guys want a certain type of pen or pencil to accompany your binders, we might be able to help facilitate that type of purchase.
All right, Jill?
So I know that a few years ago, we did reduce the number down because it used to be every member, I'm looking at Donna because she's gonna nod her head, that we had a copy printed for every member of the bargaining unit, which would be about 6,000, and we reduced it to 150 so that executive board members, bargaining team members, and then there was one printed copy at every school. So that at least every lead rep had a printed copy. And I'll say this, like I think most of us use the digital version. I use the digital version. I think something that would be helpful because finding the contract can sometimes be cumbersome if people don't know where to look on the district website. And then if they don't realize that TALC has a website, I think it would be helpful if, and I don't know if, Will, if you can see Launchpad, I can show you after, but there's a human resources tab on Launchpad. And when I open that tab, that's where LMS is, and then that's where there's a tab there to open up so that when I do PD, I can sign in electronically. But I think putting links to the contracts and negotiation materials in Launchpad would be a major help because at this point, as the vice president, if I go into a meeting with an administrator, I bring my computer and I open the contract. And if that administrator asks a question, I can do Control F and I can search something related to that question and find everything in the contract that covers that to make sure that I've done my due diligence. Even if I'm representing a member, I will have the contract in front of me in case there's something that I need to check. So we use more digital copies. I just wanted to make that recommendation that if we put the contracts for TALC and SPALC in places that are easier to find, that would be very helpful. And it could reduce the need for printed copies.
Okay, so Kevin, back to the question about what would you think would be a reasonable number?
Did we get them last year? I think I know the answer to that.
Well,
I think you've already reduced it.
I don't recall getting a grievance for you guys not getting them last year.
So you're admitting we didn't get them. The timeline may be blown.
I'm not sure if you did or did not. I do know too. I mean, kind of to Jill's point. I think the SPALC contract says one contract for every 20 employees. I don't know that request has ever been made in my time. I mean, I think typically, Jamie Michael would say the same thing as what you just said. I'd like to have one for each location. And then, whether people pick them up or not, whether people actually use them or not, there always seems to be a box of 25 or 30 left at the end of the year that go into a shred pile. I know that we have not given you the latest, the one that the TA that everyone's voting on, and I think getting it within 30 days of the ratification might be difficult, just given the time of the year and the fact that the print shop will be printing diplomas and other things that are also very important to have.
I just know that one of the favorite things for administrators to show me sometimes is their well worn out hard copy of the TALC contract. And I don't want to limit myself by agreeing to like 10 copies and then get out there and every administrator have one. And then the districts say what they typically say, which is, well, your union only negotiated 10 copies, so that's all we gave them. But somehow on your end, because nobody's bound, everybody gets one. I think the lead rep is probably the person that should get them. And I know I struggle, honestly, to find more than 1 or 2 copies of the contract in my office. Like, we just don't have stockpiles of these contracts in my office because we push them out. And so I would think lead rep would be somebody who would be responsible for having that. I know some people just like to have the hard copy so they can take notes on it. I know you can't take notes on a PDF necessarily, and sometimes that's helpful as well.
Okay, Anna?
So I was just curious, pending the results from tomorrow, I'll expect mine on April 28th because that's the new I'm just kidding. Your 30 days timeline is
So you
ticking.
didn't get a grievance last year.
Yeah, that's 2 years in a row. I do not.
And I'll just print it over.
I think Ian took care of things first.
Yeah.
All right. Will?
I think one of the other things too is if there were ever the need for more contracts to be printed, we can print those. It then becomes a question of who puts the purchase order in with the print shop and covers the cost of that. And I say that because I think the first year that we stopped delivering them to schools, we did have some principals who wanted to make sure that they had their well worn out copy for when they took you on a tour of their campus. And so we let them know the print shop has the PDF version. They can print you a nice copy. It'll be $15, if you want it bound the way that we pay for them. So,
Kevin?
I'm going to be slightly snarky, okay? And I apologize in advance. But it's a $2.1 billion budget. Like, the total cost is $5,000, that's the savings on $2.1 billion. Like, and honestly, if I had a nickel for every time the well-worn-out contract came when I got a tour, I may not need this job. But that's another conversation altogether. Again, honestly, I'm more concerned about the $45 million the state's planning to withhold from the district for vouchers that they anticipate people using based on this legislation. For me, $5,000, though a significant sum, is certainly something within a $2.1 billion budget that may be confined to a rounding error at best.
Will?
I don't disagree with you. And when you said it's a $2.1 billion budget, that's not my department budget or the budget line that's allocated for the printing of the contracts. I think though, again, and I don't know if it was Anna or Jill that said this about one per location. I personally think that that's totally reasonable. And I know, again, your e-board, I don't think the idea was to withhold contracts, but reduce our paper dependence. And if it provides us more room to pay for other supplies that we need for bargaining or for committees or that kind of stuff, that would be appreciated.
Kevin?
I again think budget is your priority, and so $5,000 to prioritize a contract, it seems a very small expense. I mean, and again, if we're talking one for every lead rep, that's 97. We're talking one for my executive board, that's 15. Many of them are on this committee, so that's, they won't get double. And then some extras, I'm not sure, especially because we can't take notes on the PDFs. I'm not sure. And again, like $5,000 seems insignificant in the grand scheme of things. You said it's 5, right? We'd be saving 5 moving that.
It's 15 per contract, right?
That's what somebody has to pay if they're one.
That's just the print shop cost, 15.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's.
What's our cost per customer?
Again, and the thing I said about that's what the union negotiated comes from 20-something years of experience of, quite honestly, some of the attitude of district staff around difficult questions from employees. Why did we not get a raise? And, well, because your union negotiated more money to go towards insurance. That's sometimes when hard questions happen down here. And the answer is accurate. That is what the union negotiated. But I think one hard copy in the hand of every lead rep certainly isn't too much to ask from a $2.1 billion organization.
Yeah, just a conversation we wanted to have. Obviously, if you do one for each building, you're at 100 anyway, so understood. We just wanted to have the conversation.
All right. Anything else on Article 2? Now, Article 15, is that what you mentioned earlier tonight to talk about? Yeah. Do you want to just start the discussion, or it is now 6:15? All right, pass it down to Anna then.
I just wanted to, before we completely step away from Article 2, the Article 2.034, are you guys going to have language for the next time? Because I know, Rob, you have said you didn't want to take away the superintendent prior to that, which I don't disagree with that, but just for the next time, will we have language?
Potentially, yes. I'm not quite sure how that conversation's going to go down, so potentially, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, back to the question at hand, Article 15. Per.
All right, so looking back at the snapshot, our interests in Article 15 includes ability to ratify and continue positive labor relations. So part of our, we have 2 things we wanted to discuss in Article 15. Probably help if I pull up Article 15. Yeah, it's just, yeah, is that a little better? Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm pulling up 15 now. Duration and acceptance. So we have 2 items we wanted to discuss. One is the duration clause, and one, that's 15.03. So it's 15.03. Duration. And 15.05, severability. somebody said it best earlier, that, and even Rob, with some of the bills that are out there and some of the changes in leadership, Article 15 really protects the TALC contract against outside entities that desire to muck with the language. One thing that we've done in the past here is we try to keep a 3-year closed contract. That's the longest we can have a contract here in the state of Florida. So I'll just throw it out there. One of our options will be to modify the duration clause to be fiscal year 24 through fiscal year 26.
So, I'm sorry, modify the duration clause?
Yeah, to FY 24 through FY 26. The other piece, I think Kevin just put that in front of you, is our proposal for 15.05, just rewording the severability language so that if there is some sort of change in law, there's a conflict, a change in statute, that the contract is what prevails as long as the contract is in full effect.
Okay, give everybody, oh, Jessica.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Line 6, should that be otherwise unenforceable?
Let's see. Yeah, I think I'm missing a word there. Just 1 second. Thank you for catching that. 1 second. I read over this, I don't know how many times before we came here today. Yeah, you read what you wanted to say. 15.05. Where did she read this? I think preceding to 6 should say, no, it's correct. Should any provision of this agreement be declared illegal by a court of competent jurisdiction or otherwise, unenforceable, thank you. It should say unenforceable.
So what, is there a line or?
Line 6.
Of 1505?
Yes, of our proposal.
I gotta get you one thing up to word.
I just have mine.
So I got your guys, you guys.
Change to unenforceable. Enforceable.
Thank you.
I don't know why I forgot you guys, but I did.
Amy, I'm sorry to do this to you, but Anna just reminded me with the option that I stated at the beginning to change the duration, the dates. Some other dates in that article will have to change as well. That just reference 1503, so we'll have to change those as well.
So these are options?
The 15, I mean, I guess I'm gonna make that an option at some point. I just wanted to
Okay, just wanted to get
just wanted to put it out there.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay,
I'm guessing
Anything else?
this would be considered an option if it's.
yeah, this is considered an option, the language. Roger.
So, Kerr, is this the original language that your council proffered, so to speak?
It wasn't written by council. This was the original language that we floated around prior to the execution of the TA.
All right, so it's the original language, that's what, okay.
Okay, any other questions, corrections? Any other story? Rob?
Number man.
Yeah, I'm not sure why the current 15.05, other than suggesting that we shouldn't meet, because 1505 currently says if something's declared illegal by a court or it's changed in the law, the parties shall meet as soon as practicable to modify the article. So is TALC suggesting we shouldn't meet to try to come into compliance with the law?
Not necessarily. We are stating that the contract would be the law of the land while it's in full force and effect. And if we needed to meet for some sort of impact bargaining, we're still free to do that. We can always bargain the impact of some sort of change. All that our rewrite is saying is just making clear that the CBA language supersedes any changes in law that were changed while the CBA was in full effect.
Okay, anything else, Rob?
Well, and there's legal terminology in here. A severability clause and a savings clause are not necessarily synonymous. So the title of 1505 under your proposed language is changed. It's no longer severability, it's savings.
Yes.
Which has a different legal meaning technically. So is there a desire to, just asking, continue with the severability language but put a savings clause in there also, or just replace it, as this suggests?
Honestly, it's neither here nor there to me. I would be okay with leaving it as severability. As we sit here, I think there's some other language in the contract that basically says the titles are somewhat meaningless. So I wasn't trying to put some sort of emphasis on the word savings.
So, getting back to my initial question about timing and meeting and trying to come into compliance, would there be any potential modification of your suggested language to put in there some language that would suggest within a certain amount of time or a reasonable amount of time, the parties could convene to discuss and bargain coming into legal compliance with whatever change there might be in statute?
Yes, but I would be okay with language that if both parties wanted to come to the table, that's impact bargaining to me. I don't want language that requires either party to come to the table if they don't want to. For example, perhaps some sort of modification is not warranted, or either party may have the legal grounds just to refuse to bargain over that particular item. I don't think we're talking about mandatory subjects of bargaining here. I think the item that we're thinking of, but yeah, you can always issue a demand of bargaining and bring us to the table to bargain the impact of some change.
Well, yeah, but what I'm suggesting is it's clear as day that say the legislature says something that's in this contract is now prohibited under law. And the parties are aware of that, and that would trigger a requirement that the parties have to meet within 90 or 60 days or something to that effect. That's what I'm asking, if there's any type of willingness to at least acknowledge that we should at least try to come into compliance with the law within a certain period of time.
Kevin?
Yeah, I think for me anyway, as I'm thinking about this, the idea that the contract is the deciding document. And so as long as the contract is in force, it's the deciding document. So I guess the idea around bargaining any potential changes to comply would be after the contract is no longer the supreme document. And so I'm gonna tell you, what that may lead to is no more 3-year deals, right? I mean, just talking out loud, probably shouldn't have said it, right? But because if we declare it's a supreme document until it's not the supreme document anymore, the ending of the supreme document is at the ending of the 3 years. So yes and no, I think, but I think is the contract under various laws that I have very little knowledge of or expertise in, the supreme document related to federal and state laws overriding that.
Yeah, go ahead, Kirk.
First thing that pops into my head is when the legislature outlawed annual contracts, renewal of annual contracts. I mean, that is, I'm sorry, when the legislature outlawed the automatic renewal of annual contract teachers. That language was in the TALC CBA for 3 years, thank you. And it was ripped out at the end of the 3 years because we were legally required to do it. But we were able to keep that in the contract while the language or the law was still in effect.
Different times, different circumstances.
Same state, unfortunately.
All right, anything else? Kevin?
We also fully appreciate that, again, first time seeing, right? I mean, it was the original language, but there had been some edits. First time seeing, first time really like open, I think was maybe floated in labor management, but first open. So again, conceding you may need to, follow up with people about it. But, we had the room for 45 more minutes, and if we can get discussion done tonight, and then like with the thing for the superintendent, come back next time with kind of direction, we're far more likely to get language next time than we are not to have this discussion. To put this discussion on next session may also mean that there's time between discussion and decision. So again, if time is needed, time is warranted, right? And so I think that's kind of where we're at, but this, not necessarily a decision, but to good dialogue and making progress.
So as part of that good dialogue, could you explain why, after all these years, we would change 15.05 severability?
Because of the unprecedented number of attacks from not only legislature, but folks outside the bargaining unit. This contract is a document that's negotiated between the association and the school district in good faith. And we believe that this language adds to that protection. It's all about protecting the relationship and the language that we've negotiated. How does somebody else know what works better in this county between these parties than we do? Why should somebody else be able to rip this stuff out when we have the ability to protect it?
Well,
I know we've had a lot of dialogue about this with labor management. I think to try and clarify with what you're saying, I think it seems like you're saying that the issue at hand is not as much with if a judge tells us that the contract is unenforceable. It's more of the next part that says, as a result of a change in state or federal law. Is that fair characterization that that's where it seems kind of murky and there's an interest in kind of clarifying that piece? And I ask that because I know it also doesn't say, anything about PERC. Although I guess they're, under state law, but it's administrative, rather than, coming from the legislature.
I mean, actually, I guess you're right, we could add that. Under no circumstances shall an administrative code, school board policy, have legal force to supersede the items in the collective bargaining agreement. And we could add something like that, but I'm not really, maybe I'm being a little too picky on the legislature as I sit right here, but I think we should safeguard our contract from all entities. I'm not gonna go that far.
I said all threats foreign and domestic.
Well,
I was told you guys had a friend on the mosquito control board, so I think you're safe from attacks from that.
I do have a friend, but you no longer have an employee who's on the mosquito control board.
okay. So, where are we with this? Kevin gave the opportunity to put this on hold until next time, unless there's any further discussion about it.
If you want to.
Okay, is that okay to just kind of put all this
That's fine with
on
me.
hold till the next thing as you suggested, Kevin?
Yeah.
And our next meeting, I believe, is April 12th?
Yeah, I don't expect.
Yes, Wednesday, April 12th.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I'll be in town,
Oh, that's right, I remember.
they got it.
They got it.
I didn't come up with the language, the other stuff.
Right.
Barely.
That's right, you gave the go-ahead, even though you're not gonna be here. So, anything else for this evening? And we'll come back to finish off Article 2. Potentially, if Rob can get to talk to the superintendent. And Article 15 to continue the discussion as well. Rob?
Yeah, the 12th, we don't have a room reserved yet, so that'll be a TBA,
Okay,
just so you know. There's something else going on in here, so.
all right, everybody hear that?
We could always meet at our office if push comes to shove. Yeah, I don't know if we could do the video, yeah, we might be able to do video from there too.
All right, well, I appreciate the offer. Let's talk about it. Figure it out.
Okay. Anything else?
Don't believe so.
All right, with that, have a good evening.